This is a dollar store paint frame. No, hold on a second. This is a dollar store paint frame. I'm told people buy these to make paintings, and I'm sure those people make real works of art with them, but I'm going to use very cheap materials and basic techniques to turn this basic paint frame into an attractive model base. Let me show you how I did it. My vision was simple. I wanted to make a model base that had a little information as well as some scenic elements that'll complement a model but not overpower it. I also wanted to use some 3D printed PSP plates that my buddy Paul printed up for me. The base, when finished, would be paired with a 48 scale Corsair that flew out of Okinawa at the end of the Pacific War. The base started out as a cheap dollar store wooden paint frame. I have no idea what kind of wood it was, but for $3, does it really matter? I doubt I could buy any wood and make this for myself for anywhere near $3. In a previous video, I showed how I was able to create that information plate and then etch that information into this wooden base using a longer laser table. It was incredibly easy. And if you're interested in seeing how I did it, there's a link to that video above, and I'll include one in the description below. After etching that information plate, I sanded all of the surfaces of the wood base with 400 grit paper until they were soft and smooth to the touch. I then sealed the wood with 2 coats of sealer. And I used the stuff that I had because it was available to me. I'm sure any type of sealer would be able to do the job for you. Now there's 2 reasons why I sealed the wood base. First, I wanted to paint the sides black and not have that paint sucked into the wood. And I also knew that I was going to be using diluted glue on the surface, so I wanted to avoid warping the wood. When the sealer was dry, I masked off the surface and painted the sides with some semi-gloss black spray paint, the well-known kind that typically includes primer. Now, a little bit bled underneath the masking tape, but that wasn't a problem, so I was able to clean that off with just a little bit of sanding. And after that, I had the perfect surface to work from. PSP matting, also known as Marsden matting, was used by the Allies to quickly prepare airfields all over the South Pacific, and I'm sure it was used in Europe and in Africa as well. Individual planks of steel are linked together and they form a relatively flat and durable surface. As you can see from these images, the steel matting weathered into various shades. And I'm also thinking it would have been stored outside before being used. And who knows how long any given plank would have been sitting around in the elements before it got used. The detail on these little 3D prints is pretty good. It's very good. One of these days I'm going to get around to doing 3D prints, but the software learning curve intimidates me. If any of you know of any 3D software that's easy to use or at least easy to get up to speed with, I'd like to learn, so please let me know in the comments. Okay, painting the PSP plates was a 3-part process. First, I sprayed Tamiya aircraft aluminum out of the can. I then sprayed a diluted mix of Tamiya red-brown and NATO black. The mix is approximately 50-50, but it really doesn't matter how precise it is, and that's because it was heavily thinned, almost I'd say 70% thinner to the paint mix, and I did that so I could build up the rust color with my airbrush. I was deliberately sloppy when I painted both batches of PSP plates so that I could have some color differentiation. And lastly, I used some Tamiya brown panel line wash to add some depth to the trench lines on the PSP plates. I went with brown because I thought that anything darker would be too stark and would create distracting stripes. Now for the fun part, linking these plates together. And for that, I used some very expensive name brand super glue. Nope, I just went with the dollar store stuff. And the reason I do this is because I can get the little glue in the little tubes, and there's much less waste this way. And the stuff works just as well in my experience. Now, my history of using CA or super glue is not that great. The biggest issue being that the stuff is thin and runs everywhere if I'm not careful. So I picked up this tip somewhere, that of making an applicator by snipping the eye of a needle and placing that needle into the pin vise to hold it. This way I can get just a drop of glue and place it exactly where I want. To make the matting, I lined up a few of the planks against a ruler, and that's to try to keep them straight. Then, using my space age applicator, I placed several drops of super glue and let the thin liquid seep into the joint. You'll notice that I'm doing this on top of a piece of wax paper, and there's a reason for this. You see, like I said, super glue sticks to almost anything. It sticks fingers together. It sticks fingers to model bits. It can certainly stick a hand to a table. I've actually seen that happen to a guy. Twice. Just between you and I don't think he was the lesson learning type. All this to say, this stuff will bond almost everything, but it won't stick to wax paper. So once I had all the PSP pieces joined, I just slid it off the paper without any issue. I constructed my matting and tested the pieces on the base to get the look that I was after. I gradually joined all of the strips of PSP plates together and placed them on the model at a diagonal. Once I was happy with the placement of them, I had to trim them down. I taped down the end of the mat to the base, flipped it over, and marked out the edges using a pencil. I then lined up my steel ruler and used a razor saw to cut down the PSP plates to size. Now, I could tell you that this went completely according to plan, and they all cut together like butter, and the rows of PSP plates most certainly did not come apart as I was cutting them. But, come on now. We all know this didn't happen that way. And, well, it wouldn't be modeling if it didn't happen, right? Not to worry. The mat was easily reconstructed and cemented onto the base. There. Pretty. Now, let's kick it up a notch with some groundwork. For that, I used Model Railroad Scenic Sand because it was the finest grained thing available to me that kinda sorta looked like gravel. I spread it over the top of the PSP plates with a brush and with my finger. All I was trying to do was making sure it got into all the holes, and then I ran a toothpick down the panel lines to clear the sand out of the top of the plates. To fix the sand, I thinned a mix of Mod Podge, but any white or carpenter glue would do. I probably thinned it about 3 or 4 parts water to 1 part glue, and then I gave that mix a squirt of Windex to break up the surface tension of the water. Although most people would probably use a bit of liquid detergent, and that would probably work just as well. The fast way to do this would have been to wet the whole surface and then spray the mix over it, but I wanted to be more precise, so I just took my time and dripped the thin glue into the perforations, and then gradually worked my way across the base. When I got to the ends of the matting, I wanted to continue the gravel in a natural way, and I was careful in my placement of the glue drops to avoid splashing the liquid onto dry sand and creating a moonscape. There were times I noticed that I didn't add enough sand to certain spots, and that was not a big deal. I just got more sand, gently placed it, and then soaked that with a couple drops of glue. So there we go with the gravel. This did not take that long. It certainly didn't take that long to dry, and it made a nice firm layer for the next step, which was static grass. Remember how I'm always saying to keep building and try new things? Well, I'm putting those words into action. My buddy, Panzermeister36, let me borrow his static grass applicator. And having zero idea of how to use these things, I turned to the YouTubes to see how the railroaders do it. The concept is simple. You need a few lengths of static grass, some glue, and careful placement of the electrical bits. This took me a few tests to get the hang of how it worked. Really, the stuff just falls into place, and then the rest of it just gets cleaned up. And assuming Okinawa is anything like it is around here, weeds will just grow everywhere if you're not on top of them. So I made these weeds by using the static grass thingy over some drops of glue, and I placed them on the base in a random weedy appearance. Now that's about right for an airfield, and the base is all done. All I need to do is add the coarse air. But that's for the next video. Until then, keep building, keep taking risks. Yeah, you're going to have fun, and it's the only way to get better. Thanks for watching, everyone.